unemployment is an interesting time because you have a lot of negative that you deal with. You deal with ghosting from potential employers. You deal with rejection. You deal with the trauma of being let go from a company. You deal with the sense of responsibility that you may have for your family, financially, as a leader, as a man, as a woman, whatever that case may be. You also have an opportunity because maybe you haven't been doing what you feel you really are called to do. Maybe you haven't been doing something that you're passionate about at all. And if you look back, maybe you look at your past job and you say, man, I just was not passionate about what I was doing. I didn't like my job. And so maybe because you didn't like your job, maybe you didn't excel in your job because you didn't like it, or you didn't feel like it's what you're supposed to do. And now that you're in transition, you have an opportunity to figure out how does your value, how does your skills translate to something you are passionate about? Maybe that means you are willing to take a bit of a pay cut to start something new. Maybe that means you realize that I need to find my passion and pursue that, or find my purpose and pursue that, so that I am willing to put in extra time. I am willing to put in the extra effort. Maybe it's something like that. Maybe you realize that I have been doing well, but I can do better. I know what culture I'm looking for. I know what type of company, what type of situation I'm looking for in this season of my life. Maybe your outside environment has changed. You've gotten older. You have a family now. You have kids in school. Maybe you realize that the culture you want to be in, the type of environment you want to be in is different from when you first came out of school. All of those things you have an opportunity to evaluate. If you take it as an opportunity, you have an opportunity to potentially get the job you've always wanted, get a bump in pay potentially, maybe get promoted when you weren't able to get promoted at your current position. And all of those things are important as you go through this transition. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. Today's episode is near and dear to my heart. I have a lot of amazing guests that I have lined up that'll be coming on soon. But today stems from a conversation that I had when I did a pre-interview with a guest that I have coming up, Amy Herr. And we were having an amazing conversation, and something came up in that conversation that made me want to hit the record button for this week. And that is expectations and perspective that we all bring into our career and our professional life that shape the way we view our job, losing our job, searching for a new job, and all of the things that come with that. I was talking to Amy about a lot of things, and she will be coming up very soon. And as you can tell, she has amazing perspective and a great way of communicating what it's like to be on a job search while you're in your career and all of those things. But as we were talking, we began talking about things that we experienced as we were growing up that shaped our expectations. And one of the things that got brought up was expectations that happen when you are young, especially if you grow up in a middle-class family, especially if you grow up in a white middle-class family, where there are underlying tones that are always there that you must deal with. And one of those things is a phrase that is often unspoken, but is certainly prevalent, which is, if you work hard, things will work out for you. Now, when you're growing up like I did in a middle class neighborhood where most people looked like me. We all had similar income. We all were in similar situations. That phrase begins to come up a lot. And what that does is a couple of things. And the reason why I bring this up is important to me is that when you hear that as a kid and you see everyone else looking the same, seem to have similar income, seem to all be in the same situation, subconsciously, when you hear that, you begin to think, okay, well, everyone in my neighborhood must be working hard. And that is why we all seem to be in a similar situation. Now, in my mind, as I've grown up and experienced more things, I feel like this is somewhat detrimental for a couple of reasons. One, whenever you would drive around and maybe you would come into a lower income area, subconsciously, without even thinking about it, you develop a bit of a bias where when you see lower income areas, you begin to think, well, they must not work as hard as the people in my neighborhood, which is clearly untrue and is oftentimes the reverse of many people in lower income areas are actually potentially working harder. They may have multiple jobs. They may have harder labor jobs. They may have different situations that is contributing to that lower income. But in your mind, subconsciously, that kind of can come up and can develop a bit of a bias when you come across lower income areas. And so you must work through that. And hopefully you as a person has worked through that and understand that that is not true. That bias is not true. And so you can debunk it on that level. But in terms of your professional career, where this can really pop up is whenever you experience a job loss, whether it be a mass layoff, a firing, a one-off layoff, just losing your job in general, when you have that in the back of your mind, sometimes you can start to develop a mental thought that says, I must not be working hard enough, or I must not be good enough, or something to that nature. You develop a negative perspective on yourself, and that can creep in to everything you do after that. And the reality of that is that that is also not true in most situations, especially if you experience a mass layoff. Now, whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, I have gone through 3 separate layoffs in my time professionally. And one of the things that happens when you experience that for the first time is typically the hardest because of that expectation you have, the identity that you start to place into your job subconsciously as you're going through that first job. And when you experience a mass layoff like I did, which was an oil downturn in 2015, clearly I had no control over the oil price globally. It would be arrogant and dumb of me to assume that I did, right? But I was a casualty of the oil downturn. And I lost my job as a result of global situations, right? But still, when you lose that job, that phrase of if you work hard enough for you, if you work hard, things will work out, will creep into your mind, and you'll start to wonder, why didn't I create enough value within this company that I would have been able to stay? And in my situation, in that first layoff, everyone in our department, everyone in our building was subject to that layoff, was a possible layoff other than 2 people. And you find out that those 2 people were the only 2 people that were considered untouchable that wasn't in the management or director level. So again, you can start to talk to yourself and say, why wasn't I one of these untouchable people? But the problem with that is that that begins to creep in and can work on your self-confidence, can work on your ability to recover, and it is detrimental to you moving on to your next situation and being able to thrive in your next situation. And if you think back to when you were in college, most of the time, the expectation that you had of what job you were going to get changed. When I first went into college, I thought that I wanted to get into pharmaceutical sales. The only thing I knew about pharmaceutical sales was earning potential. That was it. I knew nothing of the job. I knew nothing of what it all entailed. But I knew someone who was in pharmaceutical sales who was doing really well, and I was seeing them go on real lavish vacations, drive nice cars, and have a life that I thought that I wanted. And in that time, I even decided that I wanted to go into college and approach pharmaceutical sales on the science side. And so I went into college as a biochem major, which even saying that now almost makes me laugh. And I got a semester and 2 weeks into that major, and I realized I didn't want to go into biochemistry. It wasn't for me. I was sitting in a Chem 2 class, and as he was describing Chem 2, I realized this isn't what I want to do. Nothing against Chem 2. And I love that there are people who are scientific minded and love science and love studying science. But I realized it wasn't for me. The expectation that I set on myself when I first got into college changed after 1 semester. And I decided that no, that's not what I wanted to do. I actually wanted to be a marketing major. Coming out of school, the expectation that got set on me because I was a marketing major and the jobs that were available in 2008 were mainly life insurance sales, was really the only people that were wanting to interview me at that time. Now, I ended up going into oil and gas through a story that I won't bore you with, but I went into an interview with life insurance, and it was my very first interview, and was told very quickly that this is not a profession for you based on my mental makeup, based on how I approach life in general. Life insurance sales was not going to be for me. Again, expectations changed. I grew up in a family full of engineers. My father was an engineer. My sister is an engineer. My cousins are engineers. When I got into oil and gas, in my mind, I was a little bit confused on what I was going to do because, again, I'm a business major. I don't have an engineering background. I can't do mechanical engineering. But it seemed like most of those jobs were engineering. And rightfully so. It's heavily revolving around engineering. But my expectations were that I would find what I was wanting to do. And I ultimately did in project management. When I heard the director of project management describe their job, describe what they do, describe what it was that they do on a daily basis, I said, that fits me perfectly and is exactly what I want to do. So the expectation, again, is that once you find what you want to do, you're going to automatically be able to do it. You're going to work hard. You're going to climb up that social ladder. Now, I have to be honest that a big expectation that people have when you come out of school is that you're going to get your first job. You're going to do amazing. You're going to get recognized for that. You're going to get promoted multiple times, continue climbing that ladder, and it's going to be a steady rise up a hill. As I look back on the people that I have known throughout my career, I can come up with one person that happened to, that had a steady rise, that every time they got a new job, it was a promotion. They continually got to work, never got laid off, always was fulfilling that expectation. I know one. Literally everyone else I have ever known has had some sort of complication, divergent in the road, and has had to, at some point, build themselves back up. It's just a part of life. And it's easy to lose perspective of that whenever all of a sudden your life gets derailed and you lose a job. So that brings me to something different, which is perspective. A fortunate thing about being let go from a company, if there is a fortunate thing, is that perspectives can change. I know my perspective of a job changed after being let go that first time. And part of that was because when you place your identity in your job, you take a lot of things personally. Things are personal. Your performance is personal. The way your boss perceives you is personal. Whether or not you got that promotion is personal. You discount everything else. There's maybe politics involved. There may be someone who is just performing a little better than you. That doesn't mean you're not performing well. Just means maybe they are just exceeding in this. Maybe they have a gift in whatever that profession is, and they are exceeding you, and maybe they got the promotion over you. Or maybe they're a better interviewer or something, right? But once you get let go that first time, you kind of realize when you're dealing with business, it isn't personal. And it really has nothing to do with your self outside of work. And it's just a job. Now, don't get me wrong. I take extreme personal pride in doing a good job. I want to exceed expectations. I want to excel. And I want to bring extreme value to whatever company I am working for. But even if you are doing those things, that doesn't mean that you won't experience setback. My first two layoffs, let's just use that as an example. I've already talked about the first one. It was an oil downturn. My second one happened during COVID at the end of 2020. Now, if you had a global pandemic on your bingo card of what you were going to experience during your career, congratulations. I'm proud of you for having the foresight to know that there was going to be a global pandemic. But I certainly didn't. And I also didn't have on my bingo card that the company that I was going to be working for would be going through a regime change and ousting a CEO and bringing in a new CEO who wanted to bring in his people when he got to the company. And when both of those things converged, a global pandemic, lower revenue, and a new CEO that wanted to bring in his people, I was laid off. I was excelling. I was a marketing director. I had made some amazing content for the company, content that they still use to this day. I was learning tons of things about creating content and SEO and marketing social media wise and marketing outside of social media and trade shows and how to have effective messages and all of those things that come with marketing. And I was excelling. But those two things came together and I was gone. But there's another side of perspective that I want everyone to think about. And that is how you look at your time when you're on your job search. How do you look at your past experience? How do you look at where you are in the midst of transition? And how are you preparing yourself for that next role? Because if your perspective is, X company did this to me, they screwed me, they hurt my family, they came after me, they did whatever they did. And sometimes that may be the case. It sometimes could get personal, and that's unfortunate. And I hope that that didn't happen to you. But in the majority of times, it has nothing to do with you. They have a value calculation that you're not a privy to. And whether or not you meet that value calculation is sometimes out of your control. But here's what you can control. Is your perspective. Every job has something that you learned that you can take with you to the next, good or bad. I'll give you an example. I worked for a manufacturing company when I moved back to Oklahoma from California. And I really enjoyed the people that I worked with. I enjoyed what we were doing. We were making large centrifugal pumps for pipelines and refineries globally. I had clients in South Korea. I got to travel to South Korea and do kickoff meetings and meet customers there and experience the culture in South Korea. It was great, but it was an extremely tough job at that time. Our supply chain was rough at best. And things that were out of your control, such as quality issues of the pumps, such as delays in getting in parts, such as inspections that maybe didn't go the way you hoped for them to go. All of these things that were really out of a project manager's control was something that I had to deal with on a daily basis. I had to learn how to deliver bad news at that job, how to deal with bad news. Some days I didn't get any good news all day. Every conversation I had was about a problem, was about a delay, was a conversation I'd have to have with the customer about that delay. It was extremely tough. But you know what I got from that? I learned how to handle negative situations. And I learned that you can work through tough situations and that things can work out if you keep your head down and keep working. I learned the value of integrity in the good so that you develop trust when you have to deliver bad news. I learned a lot. In the last job I had, if you'd have asked me a year ago, I would have told you that this was going to be a company that I worked for 20 years. I thought I had found my dream job. I thought that I had found the culture that I've always been looking for, that I had found the people and the types of people that I always wanted to work with. I was doing a job that I absolutely adored. And again, out of my control, I was let go. But there is a podcast that I have loved listening to. It's called the Lights On Podcast with Carl Lentz. And Carl Lentz was a very well-known pastor who went through a downfall, had some infidelity, has owned up to that infidelity, and has now come out with a podcast where he speaks a lot about those issues, but also had to go through a lot of personal work to regain his wife's trust, regains people's trust. And he dealt a lot with coaches, life coaches. He's been in therapy. It's a great podcast. But one of the things I love that he talks about a lot is taking ownership of your situation. And what does that look like in the job search? Take ownership of your time at that company. What did you do really well? And what are some things that you can improve on? And I guarantee if you really objectively look at your time at that company, you can find things that you can improve on. That doesn't mean you did a bad job, but you can still improve. And if you start to take ownership of your situation in that way, you can improve yourself as a human being and as an employee while you're going through transition. While you're in this transition, what are you doing to improve yourself? Are you learning new things? As a project manager, there's always things that you can learn. There are new techniques. AI's coming out. There are new tools that you can use. There are soft skills that you can continue to cultivate to become a better leader of that project whenever you get the opportunity to lead another project. And as your future employer, as they look at you as you're going through interviews and you're able to tell them how you've improved yourself over the course of your time in transition, think about how good that looks for you versus I've just been sitting here applying for jobs, wallowing in my last situation. That comes across. If you've put yourself in a negative headspace and in some ways became lazy, that comes across in your interview. Because when they ask you, what have you been doing in this time that you've been unemployed? And you say, I've just been applying for jobs. I've taken some time with my family, which is all good things. But you haven't tried to improve yourself in any way versus someone who has maybe taken some classes, found some free courses, tried to go get a certification, learn more about their profession, learn more about themselves, gain some leadership perspective. Think about how different that sounds to a future employer. And I think it's important for us to really sit down and have the perspective of, I have an opportunity to grow. Unemployment is an interesting time because you have a lot of negative that you deal with. You deal with ghosting from potential employers. You deal with rejection. You deal with the trauma of being let go from a company. You deal with the sense of responsibility that you may have for your family, financially, as a leader, as a man, as a woman, whatever that case may be. But you also have an opportunity because maybe you haven't been doing what you feel you really are called to do. Maybe you haven't been doing something that you're passionate about at all. And if you look back, maybe you look at your past job and you say, man, I just was not passionate about what I was doing. I didn't like my job. And so maybe because you didn't like your job, maybe you didn't excel in your job because you didn't like it. Or you didn't feel like it's what you're supposed to do. And now that you're in transition, you have an opportunity to figure out, how does your value, how does your skills translate to something you are passionate about? Maybe that means you are willing to take a bit of a pay cut to start something new. Maybe that means you realize that I need to find my passion and pursue that, or find my purpose and pursue that, so that I am willing to put in extra time. I am willing to put in the extra effort. Maybe it's something like that. Maybe you realize that I have been doing well, but I can do better. I know what culture I'm looking for. I know what type of company, what type of situation I'm looking for in this season of my life. Maybe your outside environment has changed. You've gotten older. You have a family now. You have kids in school. Maybe you realize that the culture you want to be in, the type of environment you want to be in, is different from when you first came out of school. All of those things you have an opportunity to evaluate if you take it as an opportunity. You have an opportunity to potentially get the job you've always wanted, get a bump in pay potentially, maybe get promoted when you weren't able to get promoted at your current position. And all of those things are important as you go through this transition. And the more conversations I've had on this podcast, the more I realize how important those things really are in shaping how you present yourself to that future employer. Taking care of yourself mentally, going to therapy if you need therapy, taking care of yourself physically, and how important that is for confidence and feeling your best self when you get in front of them. Dealing with the trauma of a mass layoff. And I know the word trauma gets overused nowadays and gets used as a catch-all sometimes for anything that happens to people, but it really is traumatic to get let go. And I understand that. I've been there. It's shocking. It's scary. It's, what am I going to do now? All of those things. Deal with those things so that when you can get in front of those future employers, you are presenting exactly who you want to present of yourself to them. And not walking out of interviews going, gosh, I just didn't say this right, or I didn't answer this the way I really wanted to, or I didn't have the body language that I was hoping to have because I was in a bad space mentally. All those things matter when you get into that interview. So I hope that by me talking about these things, it's triggered something in you to say, maybe I need to do a few things different because what I'm doing now isn't working. If you're that person who's been applying blindly to job after job after job, you haven't been tailoring your resume, you haven't been networking, you haven't been trying to find the hidden job market, you've just been assuming that at some point you'll play the numbers game, I'll put in as many applications as I can, and one of them's going to hit. And by all means, I hope that happens. But if you've been going for a year or so and you've put in thousands of applications and it's just not happening, it's time to reevaluate what you need to do. Change your perspective of how you need to find that next job. Maybe put yourself out there in a situation that maybe you're not comfortable doing, but you know is important in networking. Getting out in front of people, meeting people, having conversations that are value-driven. Not making things about yourself, making it about other people. Changing the way you approach people because you never know what's going to happen. And understand that you literally never know what that situation could be. I just recently got a call back from a company that I interviewed with back in February, and there wasn't a job available at that time, but I got to the final round and I had a really good interview session with the 3 people that I talked to, and I really liked them and I liked the job. It just wasn't available at that time. And then months later, 4 or 5 months later, I got a call back from them because I had a perspective of no isn't always no. No sometimes is not right now. And you never can tell what can come of the work you put in. So I hope that's encouraging to you, because that's what I'm hoping to get across to you. We are all going through similar things. You are not a failure. That's 1. You're not broken. That's 2. You're not a bad employee. That's 3. And even if you are one of those things, you're not destined to be that forever. You can change your situation. You have the power to do it. And Lord knows if I can do it, anyone can do it. But that'll do it for this episode. And again, if this is the first episode that you've ever listened to, this is a little bit different. Typically, I have a guest. I have had a few lately where it's just me, but most of the time I try to have a guest on that is an expert in this field. And I have some lined up that are coming very soon. But thank you for hitting the play button. And if you've gotten this far, thank you so much. And if you've been a loyal listener to me over the course of these months that I've had this podcast, I can't thank you enough. I know I say that every week, and it can sound like I'm just saying it to get something out, but I truly mean it. It's an honor for you to hit a play button and for you to listen, especially if you listen all the way through. Because attention spans aren't what they used to be, and it's an honor for you to put enough trust in me to listen to the end. If you are someone who is listening, I would ask one thing. Please rate and subscribe to this podcast. Help me get in front of more people. Help me encourage more people. Bring information to people that are struggling to find that next opportunity. I do ask that you do that, whether you're on YouTube or you're on anywhere where podcasts are played. Please rate it. Please subscribe to it. Please make comments in the YouTube sections. Start conversations about these topics to try to make it more of a collective, because that is the ultimate goal of this podcast. But we'll be back soon with guests, and I hope that you have a great week, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.